Alright, what's going on guys? Today, we're going to take a look at a budget version of Eldrazi and Taxes. A super sweet, underappreciated deck that we can actually play for very cheap on Magic Online right now. So just to get this out of the way really quick, the reason I'm playing this deck at the moment is because, to put it simply, the secondary market for modern cards on Magic Online has basically completely crashed with the release of Guilds of Ravnica. Pretty much every card in the 2 to 10 ticket range is about half or a third of the price that it was a month ago. And look, I'm not going to speculate as to why, maybe it's Magic Arena, maybe it's Ultimate Masters, I don't know. But regardless, cards are super cheap right now. They are super cheap. I mean, you can get Path to Exiles for like 0.05 tickets, which is just crazy. I mean, normally at a minimum, they're like 0.70 to 1 ticket each. I know that doesn't sound like much, but when we're on like a 10 ticket budget, when cards that are normally like 2 to 3 tickets are suddenly, like 0.40 to 0.80 tickets, then we can actually build pretty sweet decks for very cheap. So that's pretty cool, and I'm going to take advantage of that right now. So anyway, Eldrazi and Taxes is kind of a mishmash of a bunch of different overlapping strategies. It has a ton of lines of play. It is definitely the type of deck that takes a lot of practice to pilot well, but it's fairly powerful once you have the feel for it. So we'll start with the Taxes portion of the deck. We'll be playing 4 copies of Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, 4 Leonin Arbiters, and 2 Shalai, Voice of Plenty. So the point of all of these is that they tax our opponent for things they would normally want to do in a game of Magic. Thalia raises the cost of every non-creature spell they cast, and we, by the way, are primarily playing creatures, so it doesn't affect us too much. Leonin Arbiter makes it difficult for our opponent to search their library, so it can effectively turn off things like fetch lands, and also allows us to punish our opponent by playing things like Path to Exile and Ghost Quarter. These cards are supposed to allow our opponent to search for lands, but with the Arbiter, we just get to blow up our opponent's stuff without any repercussion. I will say that Leonin Arbiter is particularly good in the competitive version of the deck because you can flash him in at any time with Ether Vial, which we unfortunately have to cut due to our budget. And that brings us to Shalai. Shalai is actually not bad in this deck. It gives us and all of our other stuff hexproof, which kind of allows us to better enforce our taxes. If we have a Thalia in play, for example, not only does it make our opponent's removal spells more expensive, but they have to cast 2 of them to get to Thalia because they have to kill Shalai first. They now have to spend extra mana on 2 removal spells, and it just makes our opponent slower at everything. And it also just shuts down decks that look to target us, things like burn and whatnot. It just punishes our opponent and makes it hard for them to do the stuff that they want to do. And then moving on to the Eldrazi portion of the deck. First off, let's note that we are playing 4 copies of Eldrazi Temple. And yes, we do get to play this on a budget. Man, modern prices are just insane. We get to play Eldrazi Temple, which is kind of cool. It's a land that taps for 2 mana if we use it to cast an Eldrazi creature. So basically, it just ramps us into big giant Eldrazi super quick. So anyway, we'll be playing 4 Matter Reshaper and 3 Reality Smashers. Both of these are fantastic when they come into play a turn early with Eldrazi Temple. The Matter Reshaper is a 3 mana, or 2 mana kind of, 3/2, that, when it dies, allows us to reveal the top card of our library. If it's a permanent card with mana cost 3 or less, we put it directly into play. And if it isn't, we still get to draw it. So basically, it always replaces itself when it dies. It's just a great card to have in play. It trades so well. We can always trade it, and it never feels bad because we're either going to draw a card or we're going to put another card right into play. So it's just it always feels good. I'll just say that. It always feels good when we have a Matter Reshaper in play. And then Reality Smasher is a 5 mana, or 4 mana sort of, with Eldrazi Temple, 5/5 with trample and haste that is very difficult to target. Once again, we kind of have a tax. If our opponent wants to target it to kill it, they're going to have to discard a card. So it's very punishing to deal with, not to mention very fast and well, very smashy. We'll also be playing 4 copies of Eldrazi Splicer, and this is the card that gives us so many lines of play. We can pay 3 mana to flicker a creature, and that creature comes into play tapped. So we can flicker our own stuff to trigger enter the battlefield effect repeatedly, but we can also flicker our opponent's creatures on their turn to ensure that they can't attack us, or we can do it on our combat step to ensure that they can't block. We can also use it to respond to removal spells, so basically it's just super versatile and incredibly annoying for our opponent. It just gives us all kinds of cool stuff we can do. We'll also be playing 3 copies of Wasteland Strangler, which as it happens is great for flickering with the Splicer. It's a 3 mana, or 2 mana, 3/2 that allows us to give a creature -3/-3 when it enters the battlefield if our opponent has anything in exile. It's just kind of great being able to play this, kill off a small creature, and then putting power on our own board. You know, it can be a little clunky, but it can also be kind of awesome. And that's it for the Eldrazi. Unfortunately, yes, that does mean we had to cut Thought-Knot Seer. It's disappointing. It's without question the best Eldrazi in the deck, but sadly we just don't have room in the budget. These things are still like 5 to 6 tickets each, so we couldn't swing it with our, 10 to 15 ticket budget. But fortunately, the deck's still pretty sweet without it. Anyway, that's the core of Eldrazi and Taxes. We basically just make our opponent's deck worse by making everything they do more expensive or more difficult. We shut down some of their spells, we potentially shut down their entire deck, while we fuel out some dangerous Eldrazi at rapid speed with the help of Eldrazi Temple. That's the general idea, but we do have a few more cards to look at. So, to round out the creatures, we're playing 3 Tidehollow Scullers, 2 Blade Splicers, and 2 Flicker Wisps. Tidehollow Sculler allows us to rip a non-land card out of our opponent's hand when it enters the battlefield, further allowing us to make things difficult for our opponent. They do get the card back if they kill it, but again, just more inconvenience for our opponent. Blade Splicer is just a 3 mana 1/1 that creates a 3/3 golem when it enters the battlefield. It's not a bad start. We're putting out 4 power for 3. The golem will have first strike, but this can be a legitimate game winner when combined with Eldrazi Splicer, as we basically get to pump out 3/3 tokens with every 3 mana we spend. So it's just a, kind of an extra win condition. And Flicker Wisp just gives us another way to flicker our stuff, whether it's our own creatures or our opponents. It's also just a 3 power flyer, which can actually be relevant a lot of times. And then the only 2 spells in the deck are 4 copies of Path to Exile and 2 Fatal Push as removal. As we mentioned earlier, we can abuse Path to Exile with Leonin Arbiter, and we're mostly playing Fatal Push because it costs 1 mana. We don't want to be punished by our own Thalia, so playing these extremely cheap removal spells means we won't be burned by our own taxes, if that makes any sense. Moving on to the mana base, we are running a lot of different things. This is essentially a 3-color deck because we do need the ability to produce colorless lands for Eldrazi, but fortunately, once again, modern cards are super cheap right now, so this isn't a problem for the budget, thankfully. First, as noted previously, we'll be playing 4 Eldrazi Temples to help fuel out Eldrazi creatures super quick. We'll also be playing 4 Ghost Quarter and 1 Field of Ruin, which allows us to harass our opponent's mana base, particularly if we have Leonin Arbiter out, which makes these kind of crazy because our opponent can't search their library for replacement lands, so that's nice. In the dual land department, we're playing 4 Concealed Courtyard, 4 Caves of Koilos, and 2 Shambling Vents. That's right, we're playing Concealed Courtyards because they're 10 cents each at the moment, so totally worth playing. And the reason we're playing Caves of Koilos, by the way, is because it adds all 3 of our colors. Again, we need colorless for Eldrazi, so it adds black, it adds white, and it adds colorless mana, which is very important. And then Shambling Vents comes into play tapped, but we can animate it into a 2/3 lifelinker, which can be incredibly useful in some games, so not bad even if it does come into play tapped. And then we're just going to be playing 2 plains and 2 swamps, and maybe we should have a waste, but I'm going to chance it. We do have all the ghost quarters and stuff, so yeah, 2 plains, 2 swamps, hopefully that's fine. So taking a super quick look at the sideboard, we'll be playing 3 Tormod scripts because Creeping Dredge is super popular right now, and having a 0 mana turn 1 graveyard hate card is definitely important. And then we'll also be playing 2 each of Fragmentize and Fatal Push. Once again, we're playing Fragmentize because it only costs 1, which is important with Thalia. We'll also be playing 2 Cabals and 2 Sin Collectors. Cabal is great against spell heavy decks, and Sin Collector is absolutely bananas with all the flickering we can do. It exiles a spell permanently, so every time we can flicker it, we can remove a card forever. It's just obscenely stupid against any spell heavy deck. It's ridiculous. And then finally, we'll be playing 2 Aven Mind Sensors and a 4th copy of Reality Smasher. The Mind Sensor just gives us another way to tax our opponent, as well as giving us another evasive threat if necessary. Not super threatening, it's a 2-power creature, but sometimes it's necessary. And the 4th Reality Smasher is if we just want to get extra smashy. And that's the deck. All in all, it's not bad. I mean, with the current state of the secondary market for modern cards on Magic Online, we can actually play a deck like this. I mean, yes, we did have to cut Ether Vial and Thought-Knot Seer, and that kind of sucks. Those were, kind of important parts of the deck. But the deck is still super solid for this price, and it's probably way better than anything we could normally be able to play on this channel. I'm not sure how you guys feel about me playing an established deck. We do kind of do homebrews and, weird takes on traditional archetypes, but just with the price of modern right now, I really wanted to play something super cool, and I really like the idea of this deck, so yeah, that's what we're doing. So anyway, we'll be playing 5 games with us in the tournament practice room on Magic Online, and if you want to see those games, as always, check the description, there should be a playlist, and I will see you in the first match.